The music didn't stop when my bones snapped. People laughed while my blood soaked the marble floor. Someone said, "He'll be fine." That's when I realized my life was worth less than the cake on the table. The chandelier above me spun slowly, each crystal slicing light into my eyes like knives. I tried to scream, but my jaw wouldn't obey. I tasted iron. I heard my aunt complain about the mess. I heard my cousins arguing over photos. No one looked at me until the silence became inconvenient. In the ambulance, I counted breaths instead of seconds. In out, in out. Pain has a way of sharpening memory. Every face at that party burned itself into my mind. Especially hers. My mother stood at the hospital door like a judge who'd already decided the verdict. The doctor spoke softly, urgently, internal bleeding, spinal risk, surgery now. I watched her lips tighten, the way they did when bills arrived. "No," she said. One word. Clean, final. I tried to lift my hand. Nothing happened. "She's conscious," the doctor insisted. "She needs consent." My mother signed something anyway. Later, when the hallway emptied and the machines hummed like insects, I listened to my own thoughts for the first time. They were calm. Too calm. I understood then panic wastes energy. Patience passed. Or night. It didn't matter. Pain taught me time was flexible. Visitors came and went. Apologies floated above me like smoke, thin, harmless, gone fast. My mother never apologized. She brought flowers once, cheap ones. They smelled like funerals. I learned to observe. Nurses, schedules. The way people tell the truth when they think you're broken enough not to remember. I remembered everything. When the specialist finally reviewed my scans, his face changed. He looked at me, then at the file, then back at me. "This should have been done immediately," he whispered. I smiled inside my head. Not because I was relieved, because I finally understood what had been taken from me and what I was owed. That night I overheard my mother on the phone outside my door. Her voice was low, careful. "It's already signed," she said. "There's no going back now." My heart monitor quickened, and for the first time since the accident I felt something stronger than pain waking up inside me. Silently, patiently. Days blended into nights, the fluorescent lights of the hospital humming above like a chorus of unseen observers. Every movement in the hallway was a signal, footsteps, whispers, the clatter of trays. I could sense who pitied me, who judged me, and who simply passed by without a second thought. I cataloged it all. Every gesture, every glance, every lie that floated unspoken through the sterile air. I spent hours staring at the ceiling tiles, tracing the cracks as though they were maps of a city I'd one day conquer. Pain was my tutor, injustice my fuel. The doctors called it recovery, I called it reconnaissance. Each twitch in my body, each ache in my spine reminded me that my life had been stolen, and I intended to reclaim it, but on my terms, slowly, methodically. Visitors tried to fill the emptiness. My cousins with their hollow smiles, my aunts with their carefully rehearsed concern. My mother never stepped closer than the doorway. Even when she came to check, her eyes avoided mine, glancing at monitors, at charts, at anything except the boy she'd almost let die. I learned things quickly. Secrets revealed themselves in habits, in tone, in the way people assumed weakness was permanent. The nurses unknowingly told me more than they realized. The doctor, worried about liability, revealed my mother's lack of urgency to me in passing comments. Each revelation added another layer to the storm brewing inside me, a storm no one yet saw coming. One night, I overheard a conversation that made my blood freeze and pulse at the same time. My mother, speaking softly into the phone, unaware that I could hear everything through the slightly open door. "She's alive for now. But if he recovers fully, we'll have a problem. We need to make sure he never forgets." I pressed myself harder against the bed, my heart hammering. Never forgets. They had no idea I was already remembering everything. Pain sharpened into clarity. The hum of the monitors became a metronome for planning. Each beep was a tick of time, counting down toward an eventual reckoning. I had learned patience. The world would mistake my silence for surrender. But it was not, it was preparation. My physical therapy began weeks later. Crawling, lifting, walking, every movement forced me to confront limitations that had been imposed upon me. Every drop of sweat, every tear was a promise. I learned to channel pain into focus. What they thought was my weakness became my weapon. My body, slowly regaining strength, mirrored the sharpening edge of my mind. People watched me with pity, with expectation, with curiosity. They didn't realize the predator they were observing was already awake. I smiled when they looked small, almost imperceptible. My smile did not forgive. It did not comfort, it reminded me of something I had learned early. Perception is as powerful as action. One evening, alone in the dim hospital room, I ran my hand over the scar forming along my ribs, hidden beneath bandages. The faint sting was a reminder, a symbol. I whispered to no one. Yet with intention, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." My mind rehearsed encounters, conversations, confrontations. I dissected every lie spoken by my mother, every careless word from relatives, every shallow expression of concern that masked betrayal. Each memory became a scene in a story only I could tell, only I could direct. And the audience, my betrayers, would play their parts perfectly when the time came. I discovered patterns. Human nature doesn't change, even when lives are at stake. I cataloged habits: who lied when guilt pricked them, who tried to manipulate through fear, who underplayed their own culpability. Every weakness I observed, every crack in their composure, would later serve as an opening. But not yet. Timing was everything. During the long sleepless nights, I practiced patience as one might practice a deadly skill. I didn't just wait, I trained my mind. I imagined dialogues, confrontations, moments of revelation where the tables would turn. I relived the accident, the laughter of the party, the moment my mother signed that paper without a second thought. Each recollection tightened the coil of anticipation. By the time I left the hospital, walking with measured steps, my body was functional, but my mind was far more lethal. I wasn't a boy who had been betrayed, I was a storm in waiting. I moved through the house quietly, learning once again the habits of those who had underestimated me. Every conversation, every glance, every whispered remark about my condition was noted and stored. My silence was deafening, my restraint terrifying. The first confrontation happened without warning. A distant cousin, unaware I was observing, mocked me under the guise of concern. "You'll never walk properly again. Maybe this is just how things are supposed to be for you." I looked at him, calm, measured. My voice didn't rise, but the words cut through his confidence like a blade. "Perhaps, but perhaps I'm only getting started." He stepped back, unease creeping into his eyes. That unease was proof perception is as dangerous as action. Days turned into weeks, and I learned the art of invisibility within my own home. I watched my mother, her meticulous routines, her unspoken anxieties, her casual cruelty thinly veiled with maternal concern. Each evening, I retraced my thoughts of the accident, of her betrayal, sharpening them into strategies, into scenarios. I allowed my body to heal fully while my mind orchestrated events with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony of vengeance. The world thought I was recovering, learning to forgive, learning to forget. But I had already made a vow in silence, in pain. In every shivering moment on that hospital bed, nothing would remain untouched by what was owed. I had started small, gathering information, observing, learning habits, testing reactions. I would wait until the perfect moment, until the alignment of weakness, opportunity, and necessity was exact. Only then would I act. And yet I was not reckless, I was patient. Every observation became a tool. Every whispered lie, every glance of disdain, every careless gesture a key. They didn't know I was awake, fully awake. One night I stood at the edge of my bedroom window, looking down at the garden below. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the world was silent except for the distant bark of a dog. My hand traced the scar along my side. I could feel the pulse of my own rage. Not blind fury, but a meticulous, patient fury that had been cultivated over weeks of pain and observation. The wind carried voices from below, laughter, arguments, meaningless chatter. I smiled quietly. They believed the past could be forgotten. They believed that because I was quiet, I was powerless. But the most dangerous storms are silent at first. And I was a storm. I whispered into the darkness words no one would hear, but words that steeled me. "Soon, very soon you will understand." And in that silence, in the cold of the night, I felt the final edge of something awakening inside me. A patience honed to perfection, a mind sharpened like a blade, a body rebuilt through pain, and a plan that would not fail, not for chance, not for hesitation, not for them. The world was still unaware, but it would not remain so. If you want, I can continue the next 3,000 words in the same cinematic, suspenseful, YouTube-ready style, keeping it dark, slow burn, and revealing strategic revenge moves without ending the story until you say. The house had its own language at night. Doors sighed. Even the walls seemed to listen. I learned this after I returned, how silence isn't empty, it's crowded with truth. They treated me like glass, fragile, temporary. My mother spoke to me in a voice reserved for strangers and funerals, soft, polite, empty. She never asked how much I remembered. That omission alone told me everything. I began waking before dawn. Pain did that, dragged me out of sleep and left me staring into the dark. Those hours were mine. I replayed conversations, reconstructed timelines. I mapped the party in my head, the placement of tables, the spilled drink, the loose railing everyone pretended not to notice. Accidents are rarely accidents. They're usually decisions made earlier by people who didn't think consequences would look like me. Breakfasts were performances. My mother would place a plate in front of me without meeting my eyes. "Eat," she'd say. Not "are you okay?" Just eat. I bade obedience is useful when people underestimate it. Relatives visited in waves. Some brought food. Some brought pity. A few brought curiosity sharpened into something uglier. They asked questions that weren't questions. Do you remember falling? Do you remember who was near you? Do you remember what your mom did for you after? I answered sentences. Neutral tone. I let them believe my memory was damaged, scattered, unreliable. Nothing disarms like perceived weakness. In private, I wrote everything down, not on paper can be found, but in my head in a structure so rigid it felt like architecture. Dates, voices. Exact wording. The human brain forgets details when it's emotional. I refused to be emotional, I was precise. Physical therapy hardened me. Every stretch felt like betrayal revisited. Every step was a negotiation with pain. The therapist encouraged me with smiles and milestones. She didn't know that every time my muscles burned, I whispered a name. Not in anger. In acknowledgement. At night the nightmares came. Not of the fall, but of the moment in the hospital hallway, when I heard the pen scratch paper. That sound followed me, a dry, final sound. Sometimes I woke with my heart racing, convinced I could still hear it. I started noticing my mother's tells. The way she rubbed her thumb against her ring when nervous. The way she cleaned already clean surfaces when cornered by guilt. The way she avoided mirrors when she thought no one was watching. People reveal more than they hide. One evening, I caught her arguing on the phone in the kitchen. I stayed just out of sight, my steps careful, my breathing slow. "You said it wouldn't come back on me," she hissed. A pause. "No, I didn't refuse care. I made a decision. That's different." Another pause, longer this time. "I did what I had to do." The word had echoed. People use it when they want necessity to absolve them. I stepped away before she saw me, not because I was afraid but because timing matters. Confrontation is a blunt instrument. I preferred precision. Days passed. Then weeks. My limp faded enough to be dismissed as recovery. My quiet became routine. They stopped watching me. That was the most dangerous mistake they could make. I started asking questions. Casual ones, about family finances, about insurance, about paperwork from the hospital. I asked them at moments when defenses were low, after dinner, during distractions, when people wanted to feel helpful. Too easily, one afternoon a folder appeared on my desk. My medical records, no explanation, no apology, just the weight of paper and the smell of ink. I didn't open it right away. Power isn't in possession. It's in restraint. When I finally did alone, I read every word, every note. Every timestamp. I saw the urgency, the recommendations, the risks outlined in cold, clinical language. And then the signature. Her signature, clean. Confident. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I closed the folder and put it back exactly where it had been. That night I dreamed without fear. For the first time since the accident, my sleep was deep. Purpose has a calming effect. The next shift in the house was subtle. Conversation stopped when I entered rooms. My name was spoken less. People avoid what reminds them of choices they can't undo. A family dinner turned tense when an uncle joked, too loudly, about how everything happens for a reason. I looked at him for a beat too long. He laughed, then stopped. Silence spread across the table like a stain. Later, my mother confronted me in the hallway. She said, "I'm observing," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You should focus on healing." "I am." That was the closest we'd come to honesty. I began preparing, not acting, preparing. I reconnected with old contacts. I listened more than I spoke. I let people underestimate my reach. I learned which doors were locked and which only looked that way. One evening, while helping my mother sort documents, I watched her hands tremble as she misplaced a file. The file. The one from the hospital. I picked it up and handed it to her. She froze, our eyes met. For the first time, she didn't look away. "You shouldn't worry about those things," she said. "I don't," I answered. "I remember them." Her breath caught, just for a second, but it was enough. After that, the house felt different, tighter, like it knew something had shifted, like it was holding its breath. I stood in my room later, lights off, window open. The night air was cold against my skin. Below, the garden lights flickered. Somewhere, laughter drifted in from a neighbor's house. Ordinary life. I placed my hand over the scar beneath my shirt. Not with anger, with acknowledgement. They thought survival was the end of the story. They thought silence meant forgiveness. They thought time would soften memory. They were wrong, very wrong. And as I turned away from the window, my phone vibrated once in my hand. An unfamiliar number, a single message, only 6 words long. Enough to make my pulse slow, enough to make me smile. I didn't reply, not yet. The message lingered on the screen, a simple string of words. "We know what happened." No sender, no number saved, nothing else. The chill that ran through my spine wasn't fear, it was recognition. Someone knew, someone had always been watching. And for the first time I realized I wasn't the only predator in the room. I locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket. My eyes scanned the shadows of my room, the faint hum of the city beyond the window. Every sound, every flicker of light became a clue. I had been patient, I had been precise, I had been quiet, and now the game was changing. The next day, I returned to the living room under the guise of recovery. My mother was sitting on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, pretending normalcy. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted to the door every few minutes. I smiled faintly, just enough to unsettle her. Breakfast passed in silence, a ritual I had begun to master. She didn't offer small talk. She didn't ask how I slept. I noticed the way her lips pressed together when she thought I wasn't looking. That tension, it was mine to study, to manipulate. I began testing her, subtle cues, questions I didn't really need answers to, observing reactions, a slip of tone here, a hesitation there. Every moment was data, every pause was evidence. In the afternoon I walked slowly through the house, pretending to examine old photo albums. My fingers traced edges of frames as though reminiscing, but my mind cataloged names, positions, habits. Every weak link I could find. The cousin who mocked me at dinner, the uncle who joked about fate, the nurse who forgot to mention an early complication, all stored for later use. Even my mother's movements were under scrutiny. The way she straightened chairs, the way she adjusted the curtains, the way she held her coffee cup like a shield. She had no idea I saw everything. Or maybe she did, and that was exactly what made the game so delicious. I spent nights sharpening my mind, replaying conversations in the hospital hallway, the signature on the consent form, every word spoken after my accident. I imagined scenarios where I confronted them, but I didn't rush. Patience was part of the plan. Timing was everything. Weeks later, a stranger arrived at the house. He claimed to be a delivery man. I let him in. My mother hovered in the background, whispering directions, anxious. I signed for the package. It was small, unmarked, heavy in my hands. Inside was a single folder. No note, no explanation, just the weight of implication. I opened it quietly in my room. Inside were documents, photographs, and receipts, evidence of past negligence, hidden mistakes, unspoken secrets. Someone had compiled this carefully, meticulously. They were feeding me a weapon. I stared at the contents, my mind working faster than my pulse. Someone wanted the storm I had been cultivating to rise. But I didn't move, not yet. I was patient. Always patient. That night I walked through the house in darkness. The air was thick, almost alive. I passed the hallway where I had overheard my mother on the phone. I paused at the corner, listening, silence. But the weight of past conversations hung in the air like smoke. Every word I had ever heard, every betrayal, every omission, it all felt alive, vibrating through the walls. I returned to my room and placed the folder on my desk. I didn't touch it again that night. Instead, I lay on my bed, listening to the house breathe. The sounds of floorboards, the hum of lights, the distant traffic, they were no longer mundane. They were part of the map, the network, the game. Every detail mattered. Every subtlety could be exploited. Days passed. I maintained the facade of calm, of recovery. Visitors came and went, still underestimating me. They believed I was fragile, broken. I let them. I smiled, I nodded, I appeared weak. But behind that mask, I was building something far more dangerous than rage. I was building strategy. I began writing letters, never sending them. Detailed accounts of what had happened, what I remembered, what I intended. Every phrase, every word. A rehearsal for confrontation. I practiced them aloud in my mind, imagining reactions, calculating pauses, perfect timing. Every scenario ended the same, with me in control, calm, precise, untouchable. One evening, my mother left the house for groceries. The house was empty, silent except for the ticking clock. I walked slowly through the rooms, retracing steps, reviewing plans, absorbing the energy of the space. Each room held memories, evidence, opportunities. I cataloged them all. Every hidden document, every misplaced key, every whispered secret, I filed them away in my mind. When she returned, I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, looking at her as if nothing had happened. "You've been quiet," she said, almost a question. Observing, I replied simply. Her face tightened. That tightening, subtle as it was, thrilled me. She finally realized that the boy she thought broken was awake, fully awake, and patient. The following week, I began to move with intention. Small tests, minor manipulations, a misplaced object here, a misdirected conversation there. Each action elicited reactions, tiny tremors of fear, hesitation, guilt. I cataloged them, stored them. Every weakness revealed itself with a little pressure. I watched my relatives closely, noting alliances, subtle betrayals, and unspoken hierarchies. People always reveal themselves when they think no one is paying attention. I paid attention, always. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard a whisper outside my window. A voice, familiar but cautious. "You're ready." I didn't respond, I didn't move. I felt a thrill ripple through me, cold and sharp. Someone else was orchestrating the opening moves. I was no longer alone in this game. But neither was anyone else prepared for the storm we were about to unleash. The house felt different after that night. Tighter, smaller, every creak of the floorboard seemed like a warning. Every shadow seemed alive, and I knew, deep inside, that nothing would ever be the same. Not for them. Not for me. I spent the next days preparing, rehearsing, observing. Every interaction became data. Every glance became evidence. Every whisper was a clue. I was ready, but I waited. Always waited. Then one evening my mother called me into the study. She closed the door behind me, the lock clicking faintly in the quiet. "I think you should know," she began, voice trembling slightly. "There are things about your accident, things you don't remember." I tilted my head, calm, measured. "I remember enough," I said softly. Her eyes widened, and she realized for the first time the full scope of the boy she had underestimated. And in that moment I understood the storm was no longer invisible. It had begun. The storm I had nurtured in silence, in pain, in patient observation was finally ready. Every detail I had collected, every word I had cataloged, every hesitation I had memorized, the pieces had come together. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about precision. It was about balance. The ledger of wrongs would be settled. I called my mother into the study under the pretense of discussing household documents. She arrived, composed, wary. Her eyes flicked to the desk where I had carefully arranged a single folder. It was thin, unassuming, but it contained everything: evidence of neglect, proofs of lies, documentation of every betrayal, every dismissive glance. Every word that had tried to diminish me. "Sit," I said softly. The tone was calm, authoritative. Not angry, not pleading, calm. She hesitated, then obeyed. "You remember the party?" I began, not a question, a statement. My eyes fixed on hers, cold, unyielding. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, though I could see the tremor beneath. "And the accident?" I continued, still calm, still patient. "Yes," she said again, a little sharper this time. "And the decision you made?" Her gaze dropped to the folder. I watched her hands twitch unconsciously, hovering near the edge of the table. She knew what was coming. She had suspected it for weeks. "But suspicion is different from certainty. You signed," I said. "You decided who would live, who would suffer. And you thought I wouldn't remember." Silence. Thick, suffocating, she swallowed. I could see the weight pressing down on her chest. You think I'm broken, I said quietly. You think silence is weakness, that patience means surrender. But I am neither broken nor weak. And patience is the weapon I wielded when you underestimated me. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She was trapped, caught in the reality she had refused to see, the reality of a child she had thought powerless. I standing in folder across the table. It landed with a soft thud. Every lie you've told, every omission, every careless smile when I was suffering. It's all here, I said. I have cataloged everything, and I am giving you a choice. She looked down at the folder, and her fingers trembled as she touched the papers. The weight of every signature, every document, every overlooked detail pressed down on her like gravity. She realized that nothing could undo the past. Not apologies, not tears, not excuses. You could destroy this folder, I continued. Pretend it never existed. But you cannot undo what has been done. And you cannot undo what I have become. Her breath caught. Her eyes were wide, searching mine for a hint of mercy. I gave none. You want to know what I plan, I said softly, leaning forward. It's not chaos. It's not vengeance for the sake of rage. It's justice. And justice is not loud. Justice is precise, calculated, unavoidable. She swallowed again. Her hands clutched the edge of the table. The chair creaked beneath her weight. Every detail mattered, even now. I could ruin lives, I said calmly. I could expose every secret, every betrayal, every careless decision. I could make people suffer the way I have suffered. But I am not reckless, I am patient, I am intentional. And your actions, they will define the shape of the storm you are about to face. Tears glistened in her eyes, unashamed but futile. She opened her mouth again. I did what I thought was best. She whispered. I shook my head. You did what was easiest. You signed a life away for convenience. And for that you will understand what patience truly means. I watched her struggle to maintain composure. Every fiber of her being sensed the danger, the inevitability. And yet she could not flee, she could not bargain. Every escape I had allowed in my silence was gone. I am giving you one chance, I said. One chance to acknowledge, one chance to understand the truth. One chance to face the consequences before the world knows. After that you will see that patience has its price. She nodded slightly, tears sliding down her cheeks, but words failed her. She had no defense. Nothing could protect her from what was coming, not threats, not manipulation, not even love. She had underestimated me, and that mistake had been fatal. I stood and walked to the window. The night outside was silent, the air crisp. I turned back, calm, controlled. Remember this, I said. I am not acting out of anger. I am not blind. I am precise. And you have already started paying for what you refused to see. Every moment of doubt, every tremor of fear, every regret you have felt, it is mine to command. And I will use it until it is complete. Until justice is served. I returned to my chair. She did not speak. Her silence was confirmation she had been listening, absorbing, realizing the full scope of the storm she had helped create. And then I did something unexpected. I handed the folder back. I said, live with A. Every glance, every step, every breath you will remember. That is your punishment. Not destruction, not exposure, awareness, patience, like mine. Her hands shook as she took it. She stared at the folder, then back at me, eyes wide with fear, awe, and realization. You have changed, she whispered. Yes, I said. I survived. I observed, I waited. And now you will understand that survival is not mercy. Survival is strategy, and I have mastered it. I stood and walked from the room. My steps were measured. My spine was straight, my body bore the scars of pain, but my mind was sharper than ever. I had won not with brute force, but with precision, not with chaos, with control. Not with shouting, but with silence. In the days that followed, the house was quiet. Conversations were careful, glances were measured. People moved differently around me, aware that they were observed, cataloged, and judged. My mother avoided my eyes, not in fear of immediate action, but in recognition of inevitability. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained. Silence could be louder than rage. Patience could be sharper than knives. And the boy they thought fragile had become the master of a world they refused to understand. I walked through the house, scars hidden beneath my clothes, memories sharp in my mind. I paused at the window, looking at the garden below, moonlight reflecting off the blades of grass. And I smiled quietly, not out of cruelty, not out of pride, but because I had survived, because I had observed, because I had waited, and because now finally I had control. The ledger of wrongs was balanced, the past was acknowledged, and the storm, silent, precise, patient, had come to an end. But in that calm I knew one thing for certain: patience is eternal. And I am eternal in memory, in awareness, in consequence. The house breathed around me, silent, knowing, alive, and I understood finally the true meaning of justice. Not chaos, not noise, but calculated, unwavering, inevitable consequence. And in that knowledge I rested. The story had ended, but the lesson would never be forgotten.